Today we're talking about Peacemaker Season 2, Episode 3, where we get a deeper look into the alternate dimension. Peacemaker thinks this is the best dimension ever, but is that really the case? Or is something sinister brewing under the surface? Welcome to The Real Spot. I'm Bobby Foster. And after analyzing this episode, I found 6 questions that'll allow us to unlock this episode and fully appreciate it and understand what's going on. And this won't just be about pointing out Easter eggs. It's a deep dive into the most important questions this episode asks us. So, let's explore them. This episode starts off with a gigantic surprise of Joel Kinnaman reprising his role as Rick Flag Jr. But that begs the question, what role is Rick Flag Jr. going to play this season? We start off by seeing him and Harcourt having a romantic relationship with each other. But they had to keep it under wraps because Rick was seeing someone else, which is June Moon, who actually played the Enchantress in the first Suicide Squad. However, we're not exactly clear on what parts of her character are canon or not. But this reveal shows so much about Harcourt's character, but we're going to talk about that more in depth later. For now, what's important is realizing that Rick Flag Jr. represents guilt and regret. Now, not only just for Peacemaker, but for Harcourt as well. And right now we know that Argus is the main antagonist of the show because of Rick Flag Sr. We know that he wants his revenge on Peacemaker. But what's gonna happen eventually when Rick Flag Sr. meets up with Rick Flag Jr. from the alternate dimension? Because my theory is that all the characters in the original dimension are gonna meet their counterparts. And I think that's gonna stir up a lot of drama. And so Rick Flag Jr. represents a lot of trauma for a few of the main characters of the show, those of which being Rick Flag Sr., Peacemaker, and Harcourt. And with their past being brought up again, how are they going to respond to that? Let me know your theories on how you think Rick Flag Jr. coming back will affect Harcourt and Chris. And if you like talking about Peacemaker but feel like you don't have anyone to talk to, go ahead and join the Real Spot Discord. In there, we talk about shows that we love without worrying about all the hate that comes with talking about these things online. The link for that's in the description in the comments. Now, I have to bring up a hilarious question that a lot of people are having. Where are all the black people? People have noticed that in the alternate dimension, there's no black people. Now, is that just a coincidence of the casting or is it on purpose? And the reason this is important is because in season 1, race was a gigantic part of the show. Chris's dad was a full-fledged racist. And in this new reality, there's no black people in there, and that could be on purpose to fulfill some type of narrative plot point that hasn't really been introduced yet. But there's something extra messed up about that reality having no black people, which is the fact that it's getting shown as the best dimension ever.
Best dimension ever.
So yeah, that might turn into something. Right now, I don't think it's narratively important, but it could be. Because like I said, it was a huge theme in season 1. And talking about this best dimension ever, in that reality, Chris is beloved and he's rich. And so I have to ask, in this alternate reality, what makes Chris so beloved and rich? I understand people love superheroes, but in this dimension with Chris, the love is bordering on cult-like behavior.
Love you too, little man. That's a bit much.
I'm wondering if there's something specific Chris did to get this love. Did he defeat a certain type of villain? Or is it just something that over time people have just grown to love him because all the little things he's done along the way? But it's interesting because in this reality, as a person, he seems to be kind of a bad person. And we also all know that being a superhero doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be rich. So how in the world does Chris have so much money? I only have 2 possible explanations. The first is a little outlandish, but the second I feel like could definitely be a possibility. But first, leave me your funniest theories on how Chris made all this money. That'll be fun to speculate about. So my first possibility is that the government is somewhat corrupt and is paying him a ton of money. We see in this episode the Sons of Liberty blow up the government buildings. And so we know this alternate reality definitely isn't the best dimension ever for everybody. And government corruption has been a pretty big theme in the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker so far. But my second reason is the one I think is most likely, which is that Chris's dad is like selling his inventions in this dimension. Because in this reality, Peacemaker is he's giving Tony Stark, a rich playboy, and maybe his dad is the businessman and the philanthropist. And the reason I bring this question up is I actually do think it's important to know how he's making all of that money and why he is so loved, especially if in his personal life he's really struggling and he has this drug addiction and seems to be mean to other people like Harcourt. It seems like he may not be the best person, but the marketing and branding of Peacemaker is shielding him from his own shortcomings. Because we see when Chris meets up with alternate dimension Harcourt, that she has some beef with him. But she says that they could be together again, essentially, if he works on some things.
I mean, yeah, I guess if all those things were in place, we could see where we were.
Yeah.
And that introduces the question of what's going to happen between Chris and Harcourt. I know in that reality, everybody loves Chris, and Harcourt, even though they're not together, seems to still be interested in him. And Harcourt herself seems to be a nicer, kinder, more approachable person. But honestly, do we know if Chris even likes that version of Harcourt? Or is he just so infatuated that in this reality, like, he's so loved and he's no longer isolated and lonely? Does he just like the fact that Harcourt sees the potential in him? But honestly, I could see this plot going in the direction of both Harcourts fall in love with Chris and he has to decide between the two of them at one point. But also maybe the lying and the cosplaying can make him lose both of them due to all the lies. Because Peacemaker has this consistent theme of Chris trying to do the right thing and trying to be better, but always coming up short. We also know that Harcourt is currently in a relationship with Rick Flag Jr., aka Jarhead, which I think is going to be some running joke that we're going to understand by the end of the season. However, it seems like Harcourt is more than willing to leave Rick Flag Jr. for Chris, and if she does, what's going to happen there? We've already seen how unconfident Rick Flag Jr. is in that dimension and how jealous he is of Chris. So I want to know what his role is going to be in trying to keep them separated. But Chris and Harcourt's relationship seems to be the main plot point of this whole entire season. So we'll have to see how that develops. And knowing that Harcourt is so essential to the plot this season, we have to talk about the beginning of this episode. Her being in love with Rick Flag Jr. really makes me question, will she ever be able to forgive Chris? We totally understand now why Harcourt's been so shut off for the last 2 seasons. We understand now why she's so conflicted about liking Chris. He killed who she loved, and she can't tell anyone about it because she wasn't supposed to be with him in the first place. So now she's going through this immense amount of grief and pain and regret, and she doesn't know how to handle it. So she's decided to self-sabotage and isolate instead of reach out and ask for help from other people. But it's wild because in both dimensions, Chris has hurt her. In the alternate dimension, seems like he cheated on her. In this dimension, he killed the person that she loved. And so how are both of the Harcourts going to end up forgiving Chris? I think a massive event will have to occur for her to have that inner healing she needs to actually forgive Chris. And not just forgive him, to want to be with him romantically as well. I know there's a moment in the intro where Chris and Harcourt separate from each other. I'm wondering if that's going to happen down the road where they finally want to be together, but something forces them to be apart. We'll have to see. But for real, you tell me, if you were Harcourt, would you ever be able to forgive Chris? Because for me, I don't know. And even with all that going on, Chris still loves that other dimension. And it has fans asking, why didn't Chris just stay in the other dimension? His brother is there. Harcourt is there. The world loves him. He has a lot of money. Why not just abandon the other reality and go to the new one? Although the other world seems perfect, human psychology says that even if it hurts us, even if it's uncomfortable, we will stay with what we're used to. We stick with what we know. Typically, it takes some type of outside force to force us out of our habits and our routines. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen here. I think in an episode, something is going to happen to the portal. Whether that's Argus blowing it up or something else, I think Chris is going to have to make a decision which dimension to stay in. And even though his original reality is hard for him, he does have reasons to want to stay there. There's relationships in the original dimension that he just does not have in the other dimension. Like Eagly, for example. In talking about Eagly real quick, I think he's going to have some type of big role in this season because they just introduced a whole entire character just to hunt him. It may just be part of the running bird jokes going on, but I don't know. I think something's going to happen to Eagly. But other than Eagly, he has Adebayo, Economos, Vigilante, and Harcourt. He has deep connections with all of them. So even though his reality isn't perfect, is he really going to give it up just to be beloved by people he doesn't even know? Is the pull of having his brother in a different version of Harcourt that strong? And those are the 6 important questions that wrap up our exploration of this show. What role is Rick Flag Jr. going to play? Where are all the black people? What did Chris do in the alternate dimension to be so beloved and rich? What's going to happen between Chris and Harcourt? Will Harcourt ever forgive Chris? And why didn't Chris stay in the other dimension? Discussing these questions and theories was a bunch of fun, and now it's your turn. What questions and theories do you have? Leave them below, but if you want to discuss them more in depth, go ahead and put them in the Real Spot Discord. All right, y'all, until next week's episode, I'll see you.